In Ukraine, a single question is on thousands of people's minds. Am I fit for military service? Answering that isn't simple. It all comes down to a super complex medical exam governed by this massive rulebook. So today, we're going to decode that system and figure out how it all works.
So who's the one making this huge, life-altering decision? Well, it's an official body called the Military Medical Commission, or VKL for short. These are the people who have the final say on whether someone is fit to serve. And believe me, their decision can change everything.
All right, so let's pull back the curtain on these gatekeepers of military service. What exactly is the VKL? And where do they get the power to make such a critical call?
Okay, so at its core, the VKL's mission sounds pretty simple, right? It's a group of medical experts who check a person's health to see if they're cut out for military life. But don't be fooled. This is not your average checkup. We're talking about a super thorough, legally backed assessment.
And what's really important to know is that this commission doesn't just make things up as they go. They're bound by a really strict code of conduct. You've got impartiality, meaning no personal bias, competence, of course, confidentiality for all your medical info, a priority on state interests, and, an aim for transparency through the whole process. It's all supposed to be by the book.
Okay, that's the theory. But how does this all actually play out in real life? Let's walk through the step-by-step process and see how a decision is actually made from start to finish.
So, as you can see, this whole thing is really structured. It kicks off with a referral, then the commission basically turns into a team of investigators. They do a deep dive into all the paperwork before anyone even gets a physical exam. After all that, the specialists get involved, and then finally, you get the verdict.
And when I say they do a deep dive into your documents, I'm not kidding. The VKL has the power to pull just about everything to build a complete picture of your health. We're talking your entire medical history, pension files, heck, even materials from official investigations if they're relevant. They look at the whole shebang.
Now you can probably imagine gathering all that information is a huge task. To make it faster and a lot more secure, the whole process is being modernized. They're using a system called Trembita, which lets different government agencies share digital records securely. The whole point is to make sure the VKL has the best, most accurate information to work with.
So they've got all this data, right? But how do they actually make sense of it all? Well, every single decision, every verdict, it all comes down to one single massive document. It's the official rulebook, and it's called the Schedule of Diseases.
And look, this thing is not just a bunch of friendly suggestions. It's a legally binding regulation. We're talking hundreds of articles, and each one breaks down a specific illness or condition and spells out exactly how it impacts someone's fitness for service. This is what makes sure decisions are consistent and based on the law, not just one doctor's personal opinion.
So how on earth do you even read this thing? It's actually pretty logical once you get the hang of it. It's all about points A, B, and C. Just think of it like this. Point A is for the most severe cases, the ones with major issues. That's almost always going to mean you're unfit. Then you have point B, which is for moderate ongoing problems. This is the gray area. You could be found unfit, or you might be fit for certain limited roles. And finally, point C is for minor stuff or conditions that are under control. That usually means you're considered fit.
Okay, so now that we've got the basic structure down, let's look at how these rules actually apply to some real-world medical conditions, because that's where it gets really interesting.
Let's take something like a cancer diagnosis. You might think that's an automatic unfit, but it's not that simple at all. It really depends on the details. So for example, if someone is going through long-term treatment like chemo, they're considered unfit. But let's say they've had successful treatment for an early-stage cancer. Well, they might be found fit for a limited role. And if someone has been in remission for 5 years with no issues, they can actually be deemed fully fit for service. See? It's all about the specifics.
It's the same kind of nuanced approach with HIV. It's not the diagnosis itself that determines the outcome. It's all about the health of the person's immune system. So if someone has progressive disease and their immune cell counts are low, they'll be considered unfit. But on the other hand, if their condition is stable and they have what the rulebook calls immune compensation, which basically just means their immune system is working well with a high CD4 count, then they can absolutely be found fit for service. And here's something you might not expect. The regulations actually show a real concern for privacy. To protect a soldier from any potential stigma, there's a specific rule that says their diagnosis can be written down simply as chronic retroviral infection. It's a small detail, but it's a really significant one that's all about maintaining confidentiality and dignity.
Which brings us to another really sensitive topic, mental health. So how does the VKL handle conditions that you can't exactly see in a physical exam?
Well, the process is incredibly rigorous. For something like a personality disorder, for instance, the rules demand a deep, objective dive into a person's entire history. We're talking about studying all their records, service records, medical records, you name it. And what's crucial here is that it requires a full-blown examination in a psychiatric hospital setting. This is all to make sure any diagnosis is absolutely accurate and properly founded.
All right, so we've looked at the principles, we've walked through the process, and we've even seen a few real-world examples. So what does this all mean for you? What are the key things you really need to remember? Okay, here are your key takeaways. First, VKL decisions aren't random. They're based on a very detailed legal framework. Second, your complete and accurate medical history is absolutely vital. It's the most important evidence there is. Third, and this is a big one, a diagnosis doesn't automatically mean you're unfit. It all comes down to the severity and how well you can function. And finally, don't forget that the system has built-in protections for your privacy and pathways for review. And all of this really leaves us with one big final question, doesn't it? The work the VKL does, it sits at this really tough intersection. It really shines a light on the core challenge every nation faces in a time of war. How do you balance the urgent need for military readiness with the health and well-being of every single citizen? It's a tough balance, and it's one they have to try and get right every single day.